have increased a little bit as we know that there's been more economic stability in this country. And they also find that people can be happy with less. So the people that seem to have more money are actually sometimes unhappy, and this is what they call the paradox of unhappy growth.
That's so true, by the way.
Yes.
The more money you have, the more management you have
Right.
to have, and that consequently takes you away from the happiness.
Right. Now, one of the challenges of looking at happiness is that how do you truly measure happiness? And in fact, a lot of this research that's been done in different countries really relies on whoever the respondent is to find out what their own independent measures are. So that makes it a little bit more difficult when it comes to actually creating policies and trying to measure growth based on happiness, because everyone has a very individual way of looking at happiness. But I do think that this concept of maybe looking away from just whether or not one has a job or whether or not there's economic growth, and maybe looking more at indexes of happiness may be a very important thing for our policymakers to be looking at.
Well, science is going to ultimately find an answer, but in the meantime, I'll give you a simple answer. Happy thoughts makes you happy. That is extremely important. Number two, happiness comes from within.
That's true.
No one can make you happy. It has to come from within. So those two simple things have served me well.
I think those are good words of wisdom for all of the viewers.
Moving on, folks, I want to just show you this picture. This is the most amazing picture you will ever see. She is an electrical engineer.
I would have never guessed.
I would have never guessed it either. But India is the biggest producer of engineers after China. America has yet to get there. But I thought this was the best picture. Amazing. Here's another picture that I thought would be very interesting. All of you have seen Michelle Obama in a beautiful Indian light dress. Of course, by now everybody knows it was designed by a fellow by the name of Mr. Khan, who worked,
Indian.
Yeah, who's an Indian and who worked for Halston. He came to this country when he was 20 years old. This is his picture when he's 50 years old.
I think it's very smart that Michelle chose an Indian designer. I thought that was really thoughtful of her, particularly in light of having the Indian Prime Minister in town.
But what most of you may not know, that the dress she's wearing was actually made in Baroda. It was cut here, it was assembled here, but it was outsourced for manufacturing to India. I mean, I don't know why the media did not get on it. I did not hear the hue and cry that how can first dinner and she's wearing a dress that is made in India, though the Khan's father, who brought him in here when he was 20 years old, this has been their family business for years, embroidery work with silver. And he says this is sterling silver in there. And by the way, folks, when he was watching that CNN, he had no idea she was going to wear his design. They were screaming at home when they found out that she's wearing his design. I mean, I thought this is a very warm story, but no one has really done it with the warmth that I get out of this. This is fun.
I'm sure the media probably didn't know that part of this dress was made in India, but I will also say that Michelle Obama's done a very good job of using local designers and dresses and clothes that have been made in the United States, and really not using perhaps French or European designers, which a lot of other first ladies have done. So I think it's okay that she was able to outsource this, and I think it's actually pretty impressive that she looked to an Indian designer. In other news, there's a new social phenomenon that's sweeping across India, and it's called self-help groups. And this is in fact helping poor women in particular to improve their financial status. Now, self-help groups, the concept is that women collectively come together and pool their money, and they may not have a lot of money, maybe 5 or 10 rupees, but when they pool all their money, they then invest in a business, and maybe something like one woman's chickens or a garden or maybe their goats, and the interest that they actually collect then goes back to the group, and that adds to their savings pool. What the government of India did when they realized that a lot of women were starting to invest in these self-help groups was actually do a pilot project to try to link these independent self-help groups to banks. And what they found when they were doing the pilot is what they were monitoring these women to make sure that they actually made their loans, that they stayed fiscal for at least 6 months. And they found that within this group of women that had self-help groups that then linked onto banks, that they actually did quite well, and that none of these women defaulted on their loans and were able to increase their revenue over time. Now, this concept of self-help groups has really really now increased throughout India. In fact, what they said is now the number of groups has grown to about 4.7 million self-help groups in India over the last probably 10 years, and it's touched about 59 million rural families as a result. And the amount of a loan has also increased. So it used to be that the average loan was maybe about 1,000 rupees, and that's increased to about 74,000 rupees in the last year.
Wow.
And they're also finding that these self-help groups not only are helping women and linking them to local banks, which they in the past had never had access to, but they're now using this as a platform for social innovation and for even empowerment. So now these women are actually talking about sanitation and health and even trying to prevent human trafficking within their self-help groups. So it's really, I think, expanded, and the concept has really taken off.
This is called governing by community.
Yes.
I love it. Totally love it. Here is another story out of India, which appeared in Washington Post, folks. Up here we know the pill by the name Plan B.
Yes.
But in India it's called I-pill, or you can say morning after pill. It's becoming extremely famous in India. Everybody is starting to use it, particularly the young ones. The young ones now, they're making money, so they want to have a control over their life. They are living separately from their parents now.
And they're delaying marriage, and as a result, they're probably involved in more relationships, which in the past they probably haven't been.
That's right.
So sexual relationships are on the uprise.
That's right, because they just don't want to deny themselves that, but at the same time they don't want to get married. But the most interesting phenomena is the conservative Hindu groups have not spoken against it at all. It is the medical folks that are talking, hey, you can't be substituting this for contraceptive.
Well, from a medical perspective, this pill, which they call in India the I-pill, is really the morning after pill, and it can be given actually up to 5 days after unprotected sex. And certainly in this country, it's really been revolutionary in terms of women maybe preventing the likelihood of having a pregnancy, and in some cases also not having to go for an abortion. And particularly in India, this concept of having the I-pill has also really helped young women that in the past may have gone to try to have an abortion if they thought they were pregnant. And we know that the mortality rate, the likelihood of them perhaps getting very sick or dying from an abortion in India has been really high, even though abortions in India are legal. So I do think that having the I-pill and having it freely available has certainly decreased that, although what I do also think that health professionals are struggling with is that women aren't using condoms as often because they sometimes think that they have the availability of the I-pill, and so I think they need to balance it out.
Basically, when you have contraceptives, means you're prepared for it. And when you have these I-pills, that means it just happened,
right.
And you were not prepared for it. But in any case, I found it kind of interesting, that the Hindu groups